Okay. And I know that, and of course he's what's if he's a king of the hash bash? No, Adam Brooke would go crazy if you heard me say that. Seriously.
Adam Brooks, Mr. Hash Bash.
Right. But you are you're the ground game. Like you get it all in order and organize it and.
Yeah, last year was the first year that I stepped down from I guess the lead organizer position. So there's a really great team in Ann Arbor, and some people located elsewhere in the state that have really been making a lot happen behind the scenes and are continuing to do so with next year's Hash Bash. So expect big things, and hopefully it'll be the first Hash Bash where cannabis is legal.
Yes, will it be legal on student grounds though?
It'll be legal statewide. It won't be in
on campuses.
Campuses abide by state law often. State universities do. So it will be legal, but not for public consumption. But it still hasn't been legal and is not legal for public consumption as is.
And we all know what happens.
Right.
So.
Although, no, but the point being, like, even though that's like kind of like a pass given, we have seen, I mean, not lately, but we see arrests, and they do distinguish between the areas of campus that one would be in the no zone and the yes zone.
Yeah, this year was actually really incredible because it was the first year that I'm really aware of where there were 0 arrests for marijuana possession. And that includes on campus. I believe every year they'll probably arrest someone for selling brownies out in the open. But yeah, there were 0 arrests at the actual Hash Bash this year, 0 total, and that was really exciting to see.
And as I mentioned before, you're Students for Sensible Drug Policy. You've got 14 chapters around the state. Is that right?
About that, yeah. Okay. We've got people working at 14 different schools right now.
So there's some organization or membership that is there, possible voters even of age, and
That's awesome.
Working for the purposes of getting those folks out to vote and them dragging someone else in to vote as well. Is that right?
That's correct, and I actually have a bright young student at Oakland Community College with me today.
Please introduce her, and please.
Sarah Stucker from Oakland Community College, and if you'd like to say a couple things about
Sarah, please come again. What's going on, Sarah? Thanks for joining us tonight. Tell us about what you're doing over there at Oakland Community College and things like that.
I'm working on getting enough credits to transfer. I'm a political science student. Just working on starting Students for Sensible Drug Policy, a new chapter at OCC.
Excellent. Is there? I'm curious. What is the reaction by? What part of the state is it in, by the way? Which campus is it?
I'm at a couple different campuses. I plan on starting them at all 3 in Orchard Lake, which I think is around here,
right.
And then Royal Oak and Auburn Hills.
All right. So they're all Oakland County.
Mm-hmm.
And so is there any other Oakland County sensible chapters right now? Do you know, Nick?
There are some students at Oakland University.
It's my alma mater, by the way.
I've been working with on some projects, and I'm hoping to get a formal chapter.
Can I show up and talk to them as an alumni? I was thrown out of the dorms there. I mean,
I'm sure they would love that, actually, and I'm sure, yeah, Sarah would probably love to have you come speak at an event she hosts in the future.
For sure, absolutely. I'd be more than that. And Josh also is students. All right, so what I want to know is, like, when you bring this up or begin, if you have talked about it, what's the reaction of the students so far? People seem interested. Is this something that's important to students these days? What are the professors saying?
Well, especially my econ professor, who is very politically involved. Her reaction was, why? She doesn't believe in it being anything other than medically used.
Okay.
And I'm pushing for the legalization. Most young people seem to be very active about it. They like the idea. Most teachers really don't, to be honest.
Nick, what do you say about that? I mean, of the 17, or you've been doing this long enough where you're dealing with students at various universities. There are a lot of them are federal funding issues, of course. Some are private, some may not be private, but what is the reaction of students more active these days and wanting to get involved? And how do you take the current, academia?
They are. Students are, I think, more involved now than when I was an actual student, which wasn't too long ago. I graduated in 2013. But apathy was all the rage, at least, for a chunk of that. Those were sort of that was maybe the last of an era of some, apathetic, lackadaisical millennials. But at the same time, they were the issues they were looking at became more and more nuanced, and so people started working on a lot of things. So Students for Sensible Drug Policy is kind of a great example where it's an umbrella organization that doesn't just focus on marijuana legalization. They focus on ending the war on drugs, figuring out ways to advocate research for psychedelics, ending crack and powdered cocaine disparity laws, things like that, working to, take harm reduction approaches to drug use.
Needle exchanges and safe places to use.
Exactly. So students have all of these different interests, and, that all falls under the guise of drug policy reform, and marijuana legalization is a part of that too. So, I don't view marijuana legalization necessarily as an end-all, be-all, but it's the biggest stepping stone toward ending some of our most disastrous criminal justice.
But that's what I was going to say, because I know if your professor was asking, like, they may be in favor of medical, but not necessarily legalizing marijuana, they don't really know the whole backdrop of some students, because they may want to, legalize one day psychedelics and, no longer criminalize heroin use and crack sales or whatever, that kind of stuff. But but what do you think? Is it the response, the campuses that seem to breed the larger organizations, the more involvement? Is it regional? Is there something about those campuses that are more active? Are they associated with more liberal or more conservative? How do you see that? Who's most receptive? Which communities?
Right now, our biggest chapter is actually at Ferris State University, and they've been very big for a few years. So I think, it helps to have a couple really dedicated people to plant the seed and really, nourish that into fruition. But that's a pretty conservative part of the state. Big Rapids, an hour north of Grand Rapids. It's very rural. It's pretty.
Is there a professor that gets involved too? Is there some heroic professor that's kind of like, yeah, these kids are, just because it's a campus and they're into it. Like a professor may just for the education, academia, support that, whatever it may be.
So I was just at Northern Michigan University, actually up in Marquette, and they have a medicinal plant chemistry department. It's the first marijuana-centric degree available at a university in the U.S. And I spoke on a panel that their chapter hosted with the chemistry professor who co-founded that program. And she seemed, she was in favor of legalization, I believe, seemed to understand the issue, but was also, coming at it from a scientific chemistry, she was a PhD in chemistry and looked at the plant, from that perspective and believed that it should be legalized. But at the same time, I know Ferris State, I don't think they have a professor who's, they might have one or two that are supportive but not really involved, but they do have I think it's the general campus, the head of campus security or the campus police, who has been very combative at some of their events, but they've invited him and he's debated at some of their events too. So sometimes that probably helps, having a boogeyman that, you can work against, because you need to work, kind of within and without, and sometimes against the organization, if it is a university.
That's interesting. Let's talk more specifically about the campaign here to legalize marijuana, Proposal 1. There, we talked earlier in the week, there's some false aspirations, comments that have been made of some concerns among the activists and the movement. I think I was blamed for it.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Well, whatever the case
I can confirm you were blamed for it.
And I'm not going to try to defend myself. My lawyer will when it's time. But what's more important is that people recognize that independent of whether that was true or false, there is an election upcoming, and people should be involved. That's number one. Regardless of where you stand, if you Schuyler, not involved. But
Shiloh doesn't vote.
Okay. I didn't need to. But yes, if you're gonna, it's something, and people should exercise and they should be aware of the issues. But there's a limited time in terms of registering to vote. When is that?
October 9th, I believe, is the deadline to register to vote.
Because one of the things that the Students for Sensible Drug Policy are doing is getting out the vote, getting people to register to vote so that their voice can be heard and whatever their issue may be, right? But of course, we want them to be vote in favor of this. But and as you've described, of the things that you're doing are traveling around the state, engaging these student communities, getting them out to vote. And as we know, the differences in the elections are when a class of voters that don't normally or predictably vote a certain way all of a sudden show up at the polls, right? That it happened in certain phenomena over the last, general elections, president elections, etc. And there is a belief that the younger voters who were inspired in various elections in the past are inspired again this year and going to show up specifically for this marijuana issue. Is that what we're understanding? Can you promise me they're going to do that, Nick?
I can promise you that some of them will do that, and that I can promise you that we're going to work hard to make that happen, which is why, it's important. There are a lot of reasons young people don't vote at a greater clip. For students, it's important that they get registered on campus because it's not likely that they're going to travel across the state or across state lines on the first Tuesday of November to vote. And they might not even go, 2 towns over if they don't really know their polling location. For some young people, this is their first option to vote, and I think they're going to contribute a decent amount. I don't know what the breakdown was. Does anyone know how many young people turned out in the primaries? Because that had a record turnout for Michigan midterm primaries. But do we know what the young people turnout was?
No, let's find out, though.
Yeah, if we can. I'm curious.
Well, I think that's the main point, that it's a group that can be brought out. And, I saw some things that, I realized this is a group that often gets blamed for the out-of-state voting, like the whole that the votes are rigged or whatever, there's all kinds of out-of-state or voter fraud. But you have circumstances where in some, I think states have made rules to allow it and some have not, which results in either people being eligible to vote or people not being eligible. But you're away at a school or living on a campus somewhere that's not near your residence that you live at, you may not have changed your, and you're not voting. So traditionally, this group of individuals, the student group, are not participating for a lot of those reasons, right? If you have a, I don't know what the population of students would be that they're going out of state, where they're getting residency elsewhere, and maybe not voting because they, keep a main residence, but they're just, They don't register all that stuff. They don't officially take a step in their collegiate academic living to define their location and become a registered voter. How often does that happen? That's a statistic we should know more about.
I don't know, but since young people like the lacking in their voter turnout seems to be consistent across state lines, I don't think that it's.
I think this year is different. I mean, we've got
I'd agree.
The 2 initiatives that most of us, I think, are the most excited about, and certainly I think the younger voters are the Proposal 1, obviously, and then the redistricting. And I think people are really passionate about both of those causes, and that the types of people that vote for one also vote for the other.
Reassuring us that we should not panic yet, but the work still is to be done. As we know, Brad Forrester is in the northern part of the state convincing all those who have not seen the light yet. He's working diligently. And, of course, Jamie Lowe has now rejoined the group here so we can
finally we can start.
Provide his accolades and lay them out there, because he, too, has been traversing the state on several occasions, putting together speaking events and bringing together the issues so that people can get a understanding of it. But, of course, we can't overlook the fact that our 2 master debaters are here in the room now. And I think it's appropriate time to discuss not only that event last night, compliment both of them for their outstanding performance.
Excellent job. Thank you, you guys, for representing us.
Steve was amazing. He was really amazing.
But also, yes, you were, Steve. Let's talk about some of these